So usually when you're doing a live stream, it's going to be some variation of you looking into a camera, maybe with your own microphone. That camera is going to be captured and brought straight into your computer, and you're going to live stream it. You may have somebody alongside you presenting the show or joining in your live stream with a microphone and also going into your camera and being captured. But what happens if you want to bring in somebody who's in a completely separate location, a completely different physical location to you, a remote guest? What happens if you want to bring in 6 remote guests into your live stream, each with completely independent audio and video? So it's not just a case of capturing a 6-way Zoom call. Well, that was the challenge that was set to me last month as part of a paid job I was brought in to do. How to bring in 6 remote guests into one live stream. This clip's all about how we went about doing that using vMix Call. Now, personally, when I watch a clip like this, I like to know not only how people go about doing things, but also the rationale behind why they do particular things. That's all part of the learning process for me. So I make no apologies, and I'm being very clear up front. This is an in-depth, comprehensive clip. However, if you would like to skip ahead, if you'd like to know what's coming up, here is how the clip is going to be structured. The brief, the challenges, software, hardware and testing, event day, and summary. On this occasion, my client was 90min, a leading digital football content publisher who'd been engaged by Kia Motors to produce a preview for the UEFA Europa League final in August. Kia Motors are a headline sponsor of this prestigious European football tournament. In a pre-coronavirus world, this sort of branded content activation would have involved filming at the final itself. In fact, in January, which seems a lifetime ago, I was lucky enough to be part of the production team flown to Australia, also for another Kia event, this time the Australian Open Tennis, for which they're also headline sponsors. That involved flying fans from Asia and Europe as VIP guests and filming content around their once-in-a-lifetime experience. That was an absolutely brilliant shoot to be a part of, as you can imagine. As I say, I'm very grateful that that took place just before this nightmare kind of unfolded, with so many travel restrictions and public health restrictions in place. That sort of filming is impossible. Instead, the format for this event would be a 6-person video call. It would be 2 hosts, 2 fans from the clubs that reached the final, in this case Valencia and PSG, and finally as special guests 2 former big name players, Michael Ballack and Patrice Evra. The 45-minute live stream would go to air about an hour and a half before kickoff. So there's almost no doubt that just about everybody watching has by now participated in some sort of video hangout with a group of colleagues or a group of mates. Even if before this year you hadn't heard of Zoom, it's more than likely you've been involved in one. Now, something like Zoom definitely has got advantages going for it. Here are just 3 of them. If you're the host, it's incredibly easy to organize. So we needed to get 6 people into a video call, and Zoom can handle that number and many, many more, of course. 2, it's incredibly easy to join if you're the guest. That makes a big difference. And finally, it doesn't need much bandwidth to run, and that's usually a very, very good thing. People can join with mediocre connection to the internet. So one obvious question is, why not just use Zoom and capture it in something like OBS? Well, to be honest, the client had been doing pretty much just that during lockdown to produce its studio show, which is essentially a group of guys in conversation about football. Previously, this had been filmed in a small studio with the guys sat down on sofas. But as soon as lockdown happened, they had to quickly switch to a Zoom call because obviously the guys were then in separate locations. Although that's worked out okay so far, it is not optimal. And it's certainly not the best solution for a high-profile branded content project like this. The fundamental issue for me is the severe limitation of the audio setup. Everyone joins one Zoom call and all the audio is pooled together. In a live stream, like any other production situation, you really want everyone's audio to be separate. That way you can bring each guest in and out of the main mix at will. Yes, the host can mute and unmute all participants, And also participants can of course mute and unmute their own mic. But it really is a clumsy way to try and undertake a proper, slick live stream production. So the lack of control for audio is probably the biggest reason why you wouldn't want to use Zoom, in my opinion, for this sort of situation. The video as well is not optimal in that the video is compressed significantly. That's one of the reasons why it doesn't need much bandwidth to run. And that's absolutely fine for a standard sort of business call. But if you're trying to produce a nice piece of branded content, you probably want to set your production standards as high as you can and get the best quality video you can. Finally, we decided early on that it would be highly desirable to have the flexibility, the choice to switch instantly between scenes and not be stuck with having the 6 guests, the 6 contributors on screen throughout the live stream. We wanted to be able to start with the 2 hosts who would then introduce the 2 players and then bring those in as a 4 shot, all those 4 guys on screen at the same time, before maybe introducing the 2 fans as a separate 2 shot, and then maybe going to the 6 for the majority of the live stream and then saying goodbye to the people in kind of reverse order. We definitely did not want to be stuck with all 6 contributors on screen throughout the entire live stream. We needed something that offered a lot more control and flexibility than Zoom can do. It's just very, very difficult to do that sort of thing with Zoom. My first thought for the workflow is to try to bring each guest separately into OBS as an NDI input, which allows the delivery of HD video over a computer network in high quality with low latency. To do this, you need to install the NDI plugin within Skype, and that's free. And you also need to enable NDI within Skype on your computer. Now, if you're interested in trying that setup for yourself, there's a really good comprehensive clip from Michael Feyrer, which goes through this step by step, so you can always check that out. I'll leave a link in the description. So I did pretty much exactly this with some of the guys from 90min as I was testing. I did bring them into OBS via Skype NDI, and although I could make the connection, I could bring them in and capture them, I was plagued throughout with all sorts of audio problems. Basically, really nasty echo and delay for the guests. It just was not viable.
Okay. Hello. Hello. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Now let me be clear. This is not to say for 1 second that you cannot get good results, great results from this Skype NDI into OBS approach. As I say, if you're at all interested, I urge you to watch the clip that I've mentioned, which will walk you through step by step how to go about trying it for yourself. And certainly NDI as a piece of technology is something I'm very interested in using more in live streams because it does seem incredibly promising. And there's a lot of power to harness from that protocol, I think. So I'm very interested in that. However, in this particular case, I just couldn't get it to work. I think for me, this also underlined a problem I've got with OBS. And now I preface that by saying I love OBS. I think it's a fantastic free resource. It's a great way to start live streaming. Some people, it's the first thing they try and they never leave it. That's great. As I say, I still use it and I would happily endorse anyone else to do the same. I think it's fantastic. However, when it comes to the way that you monitor audio and the way you monitor your audio mix, especially what you're sending to the stream, I find the setup counterintuitive. I just find it difficult. It just doesn't seem to make much sense to me. I just find it unwieldy and it's just slightly frustrating to use. Now, that's a personal opinion, of course. Some people will be absolutely happy with it. More power to them. But if you're in charge of the stream, if it's you that's taking responsibility for monitoring the audio, you've got to be comfortable and happy with what you're working with. So pretty much after those initial tests, I realized that OBS wouldn't be the software we'd use to get this job done. Instead, we're going to go with vMix. Now, sometimes you have a bit of good luck in life, a bit of good timing, and this was just one of those occasions. Fortunately, just a couple of weeks before this job, on another live streaming job, I'd been introduced to vMix. And although I'd never heard of it before, now I'm very much a cheerleader for this product. I think it genuinely is a piece of Australian awesomeness. In one of my previous clips, I've introduced it fully, so please take a look at that. but here we'll concentrate on vMix Call. vMix Call is designed to do exactly what we needed to do on this job. It provides an easy way to bring a video guest into your production. The guests don't need vMix. They connect via a browser on their phone or computer. And the great thing is that with the top tier version of vMix, you can bring in up to 8 separate guests. That version of vMix is completely free with no strings attached for a 60-day trial. That's something I'm currently signed up for, and I fully intend to migrate to the paid plan after that comes to an end. So I decided that vMix and its vMix Call functionality was going to be our software solution. My first vMix Call test was with my mate Kevin. I was absolutely delighted by how easy it was to set up the call and bring him into my production. I used a pre-installed template within vMix to put us in as a 2-shot on screen together at the same time.
I am currently on an iPhone connected via Wi-Fi to my home fiber network. My home network connected by fiber to the WAN, and I've just got a pair of Bluetooth headphones with a microphone built in using because it was easier at short notice to do that.
Brilliant, mate. Yeah. So your mic is actually, did you say the built-in mic for the iPhone? Yeah. Having only really started using vMix quite recently, I am by no means an expert. However, I do think that it is a remarkably intuitive interface, really well laid out, just a real pleasure to operate. Now, vMix themselves run a YouTube channel with lots of fantastic resources, including information and how-to tutorials about using vMix Call. So I will not go too deep into that now. However, just to show you how straightforward and easy it is to set up. From vMix, you simply tap Add Input. Then from Input Select, you select Video Call at the bottom of the list. That will create a password that you'll give to your guest. This is a unique password for that vMix Call only. The guest then just needs to go to vmixcall.com on their browser, where they put in the password and their name. Their name's just for reference to help identify them within vMix. It's not going to appear on screen. When you use vMix Call, 2 things happen after the connection's established. 1, vMix Call automatically optimizes the video that your guest is sending to you depending on their device and also the bandwidth available to them at their location. And then 2, when you receive the video and the audio, vMix very quickly sends back to the guest a reference feed, which is typically your master program output. In other words, what you are sending to the stream. This appears in the guest's device full screen. From vMix, you can choose the quality of the reference feed that the vMix Call guest is going to receive on their device. It usually pays to minimize that and make it relatively low quality. The quality of that reference feed that the guest is seeing on their device has got nothing to do with the quality of the main output that you're sending to the stream, which you obviously want to keep as high as possible. It's just literally something that allows the guest to kind of see what's going on. Now, the clever thing about the audio that the guest will receive is that it is mix minus. In other words, it's the main program output audio that's being sent to the stream, but for the guest, they do not hear in their return feed their own voice. So they don't hear their own voice as an echo, which is incredibly frustrating and off-putting for most people. Now, as I've said, we would have 2 hosts for the live stream, and because they were London-based, they were actually going to come into the production office where we were going to be based to handle the production and set up the live stream and send it out. So it would have been possible to film those 2 hosts. We wouldn't have to use vMix Call because they obviously weren't technically remote. They were in the same production office as us. However, we decided not to do that after just 1 test when we filmed one of the hosts using an external camera, and we realized it's actually quite difficult for that person to join in the conversation and the flow of the conversation if they're not on vMix Call and everyone else is. The reason is that the people on vMix Call receive the reference feed and it's slightly out of sync with the program feed that the person on the external camera would be using as their reference. And also, of course, the people on vMix Call receive that great mix minus audio return, whereas the person on an external camera, if they're just using the program output audio, that would include their voice. we decided at that point that it's much easier just if all 6 people were on vMix call. That way they'd all see the reference return feed at the same time. All of them will receive an audio as mix minus, so they wouldn't have the distraction of their own voice. So for the hosts that were actually physically in the same office, we just treated them as remote guests, and we put them in separate rooms so their audio wouldn't bleed into each other. They wouldn't be distracted by each other. It was just easier to treat all 6 in the same way, keep it consistent, and make sure everyone had the same experience so they could engage naturally and easily together. Now, that particular production office has got superb internet connectivity. I've been in there many times, so I knew it was fast, but obviously at the very earliest stage, I tested the internet speed, and that's really something you need to do for any location, of course, that you're going to be doing a live stream from. The test results, I think, were 467 MBS download and 275 MBS upload. So absolutely no problems there. But we also had to consider the demands of actually bringing in 6 separate vMix calls into the production. Now, each vMix call requires the computer to process a video stream and of course take care of the return reference feed back to the vMix call guest. 1 vMix call coming into the production, possibly 2, would be, I would imagine, the vast majority of use cases. And also you've got to bear in mind that the PC, of course, has also got to take care of the job of encoding the output stream, what you're sending to the live stream. The PC is also taking care of that. So there's a huge demand really being placed on the PC, and I wanted to make sure that the PC we were going to use was up to spec. My first thought was to use the laptop I've just recently bought, very much with a view to using for live stream jobs and also editing on the road and stuff like that. So it's a brand new laptop that's pretty well spec'd. But also back home, I've got a desktop that's older, but is also pretty powerful. So I wanted to know which one was actually going to be more suitable for this particular job. To find out, I contacted vMix directly. I contacted them via the support page. I emailed them. I seem to think I seem to remember it was a Sunday night, and in the email I listed kind of the outline of this job, pretty much needing to bring in 6 vMix calls and also having to obviously take care of the encoding and send it to the stream. I gave them the spec for the laptop, I gave them the spec for the PC, and I asked which is going to be the better option for this situation. As I say, I think it was a Sunday night. Monday, when I woke up, I'd received a reply. To get a reply within, I guess, 12 hours, direct from the people who make the software, I thought was fantastic. But anyway, the response was go with the desktop PC because the CPU can run longer and harder within the desktop than the laptop will allow. I imagine it's to do with heat management. As well as setting everything up in the production office, we needed to check the situation with the guests who'd be coming into the stream. For them, of course, there are 2 key considerations. 1, the speed and stability of their internet connection, and 2, the exact equipment, especially their microphone solution, that they were going to use to join in the live stream. Now, obviously you want everybody to join the live stream with as fast a broadband connection speed as possible, especially the upload from their side. 3 of the 4 guests were actually overseas and their internet connection varied, but at least we made them aware that they should source within their location the best possible place for them to join the live stream from, which is going to be close to the best Wi-Fi sort of spot, or plug directly into the router if they can, of course. Now, in an ideal world, you always want your guests to connect via really high quality video and good quality audio. But if you can only get one of those 2 things done, always prioritize good quality audio. In the past, I've made a 60-second motion graphic to explain the reasons why, how I came to kind of realize that myself during my production sort of training. But to summarize, it's really so much more unpleasant for a viewer to have to suffer really poor quality audio than it is to suffer poor quality video. They forgive poor quality video so much more easily. It's much more distracting to have poor quality audio. So really prioritize that. One of the most basic things that every remote guest can do in this sort of situation is to wear headphones, of course, to minimize the chance of feedback distortion. I would also say to them, try and get hold of an external microphone rather than relying on the inbuilt microphone on the device they're using, their laptop or their phone. Always try and get an external microphone. However, I'm not at all a fan of the audio produced by Apple EarPods. The placement of the microphone is not ideal, given that it's in your ear. It's not a great solution. More generally, I'd say to people, try to avoid Bluetooth if you can. If you've got a hardwired solution, for me that's always better. Using something with Bluetooth is just introducing another potential point of failure, something else you might have to troubleshoot. The test beforehand not only gave us a chance to test the setup at the location of the various remote guests, but it also gave me a chance to practice again faster at setting up the multi-views within vMix. Multi-view is a preset within vMix that allows you to stack various inputs all together on one screen at the same time. So within vMix, each vMix call guest is a separate input. For the opening of the show, I created one multi-view with 3 layers. The vMix call input from host A, the vMix call from host B, and above them a dummy PNG I created in Photoshop. This simply had transparent sections cut out where the vMix call guests would appear from underneath. You simply resize and crop as required to line up the guest in the correct space. I also created dummy overlays for a 4 guest view and the full 6 guest view, and created multi-views for each of these options. It takes a little time to position the guests in place, but once done with the tap of a button, you can switch from 2 to 4 to 6 guests instantly with everyone perfectly in place. The only piece of hardware I bought for the project was this, a 4-channel headphone amplifier, which allows me to take the PC headphone out and split it so 4 people can listen to that same output simultaneously. I've got to say, I absolutely love this. During testing and the live stream, this allowed colleagues to monitor along with me the main program out. In fact, anything I wanted to put through as an output, they could monitor. So they could monitor the main program out without having to blast it through speakers. I can also see that little amplifier being very useful at some point in the future when this whole COVID nightmare finishes and we return to some sort of standard production office type situation where if you're working on a sequence, a video sequence or something, and you want to play it out to somebody and you don't want to blast it through speakers so other people around you who've got nothing to do with that project don't have to suffer listening to it. That little headphone amplifier allows, as I say, up to 4 people to listen to the output from one PC without going through speakers. I think it's great. It works really well, very clean amps. I really like that. So after quite a few rounds of testing, event day itself was relatively straightforward, I've got to say, and nerve-wracking nonetheless, as these things always are, but straightforward and overall absolutely a success. A graphic designer colleague had created client-approved branded PNG overlays that we would use instead of the dummy overlays we'd been using during testing, but otherwise things proceeded pretty much exactly as they had during our testing. We only got to connect with Michael Ballack and Patrice Evra probably 20 or 30 minutes before the live stream went live. So that was our window really to make sure that their audio and their video was all okay. Beforehand, I had produced a little crib sheet, a little helping guide to kind of talk them through vMix call and what to do to maximize the chances of having no problems whatsoever, and that seemed to help. One little piece of drama was that one of our competition winners was actually hospitalized the day before the live stream. On the day, he couldn't participate, obviously. Now, fortunately, and again, as a testament to the value of testing, one of the people that had sat in as a stand-in during the testing was a guy based in Spain, a Spanish football expert, and so he took the place of the Valencia fan on the day. He did a fantastic job, I've got to say. In terms of communication, I used a lapel mic plugged into my PC, and I set that as an audio input. I kept that open until about 5 minutes before the live stream started. While the mic's open, I could communicate to everybody I brought into the production. As we moved towards the live stream, I had to close that mic off. I had to switch that mic off because as an audio input, if it was audible to them, it would go to the live stream. So during the live stream itself, I was not in communication with the hosts or the guests or the Evra or Balak. We did have a colleague who was in contact with one of the hosts via a WhatsApp call, I think, going into one of his ears, was able to keep him up to date about timings, about the running order, making sure you were hitting marks along the way. All of the technical success was really kind of secondary to the enthusiasm that you can get from the contributors, and they were all fantastic, in particular Patrice Evra, who was a real bundle of energy and really drove the whole thing through. So all in all, a great success, client happy. So that's about it. Let's wrap this up. What can I take away from this? Well, one, this absolutely reinforced my firm belief that vMix is a superb piece of software. We had a very specific, quite ambitious requirement here: bring 6 remote guests into a live stream, find some way to do that. vMix absolutely answered that requirement with its vMix call functionality. I can't recommend it highly enough. Straightforward, powerful, a great solution for this particular requirement when you need to bring somebody into your live stream. Keep it very simple for them, keep your options, your flexibility, your control, running the live stream at a real high level. It's just a great solution. As I say, I can't speak highly enough for it. Absolutely worth consideration. If you have not tried it before, go out there and try it. There's a free, no strings attached trial you can get a part of. I should point out that vMix only runs on PC, but if you've got a PC and it's up to spec, I highly recommend it. This project also really, again, underscored for me the absolute value of testing and testing again. You want to test as often as possible and try to replicate the situation as closely as possible, so people in the place that they're going to be actually on the day, you're working with the equipment that you're going to be using in the location that you are going to be coming out from, really trying to anticipate all those problems. Nothing beats testing ahead of time. Finally, pay attention to improving your guest's audio as much as possible. Remember, garbage in, garbage out. If your guest is sending you poor quality audio, it's very difficult not to then pass poor quality audio out into the live stream. No matter what setup you've got, you're really dependent on the quality of the audio that you're going to receive. So take time ahead of time to find out what equipment they've got, how they can improve their setup if required. Don't leave it to the last minute and then kind of leave yourself a hostage to fortune, because nothing is worse than poor quality audio. Right, that is about it. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed the clip, if you've maybe even learned something along the way, then a like is always really appreciated. If you've got any questions, if you've got any comments, stick them down below. I'll respond to them just as soon as they pop up. If you're interested in hearing more about vMix, specifically vMix Call, take a look at the clip that's on screen now, where I detail how we use vMix Call to send what I was filming in London, an esports event, to New Zealand, the other side of the world, at blistering speed. And if you're just interested in creating better content, consider subscribing, because that's what this channel is all about.